I'm Edric,
I'm Joy.
and we're here to help you.
Get it right from the start.
We've said this so many times, and we're going to be tracking about a year already of doing this, babe. And I want to just remind even ourselves why why we say that. Get it right from the start. And I know we've tried to do this in past dialogues, but remind me again when I think you were the brainchild of this moniker. What is the thinking behind that?
I think because what happens is we tend to get things wrong from the start, which creates a snowball effect in the marriage, the parenting, and then in our children's future lives as well, right? So the idea was, can we take a more preventive approach? And also with hindsight, having messed up on certain things, having learned from certain things as well, and having role models, mentors, and done a lot of
Resources like
research.
the one you're holding.
Yes,
Mhm.
and worked with so many families because of the space we're in. And we are very much involved in family ministry also. So that was the whole idea, right? How can we help people get it right from the start? But it's still supposed to be redemptive, because if you've gotten it wrong so far, it doesn't mean that it's too late to change. It doesn't mean that things can't be undone. Certain things maybe, but I think we always want to be hopeful and realize that with God, everything is possible.
How would
So-
we revise that moniker so that even if you are 10 years in the parenting journey, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, as you said, it still is redemptive. How would we
Yeah. So we would say
modify?
you can still get it right starting now.
That's good. Get it right starting now.
Yes.
Right? That's good. So having said, and I set that up because we have been going through a series of these purity balls. And this whole episode is just almost a reflection on what we've observed. We've been running these things, not us necessarily, although at the start we were very much, well, I was very much on the ground making these happen, even with some of our crew that's here, like Andy, right? But in the years that we've been seeing this, and in recent events, because we're on the ground again and interfacing with parents, and we've been doing this around the country, we have been seeing many pains and hurts. But this beautiful celebration of this, you can get it right starting now, right? Whether it's, or especially in these areas of purity and holiness. So let's talk a little bit about this purity
Okay.
ball, right?
Well,
Where did it come from? Where did the
yes.
idea come from? And then let's talk a little bit about our observations and reflections that will help all those that are listening and also watching this particular episode.
So as Edric and I really got involved with home education, the homeschool movement in the Philippines, we would often go out of the country to learn best practices from other people, from other organizations, from other countries. So we've been a part of many of these events and movements, even outside of the country. And because we wanted to learn, what could we bring back? What could we apply in our own family? And one of the things we observed when we were in the US, and this is many, many years ago, is that they had such a thing as a purity ball. And it wasn't like your typical ball, which we are used to, which is junior, senior year in high school, where you will take somebody out of the opposite sex and it's supposed to be a romantic thing, or it's supposed to be a very significant event in the high school years that people, even they have these proposals, promposals,
Now, right?
right, that are so dramatic, right?
And actually, I wonder, I mean, sorry to interrupt, but really quick, I'm wondering, where did that even start? This tradition of when you're a junior or a senior, you ask, well, back in our day, the guy asks the girl out, right? And then they go to their prom or ball. Of course, if you're in an all-girls school, which is very present in Philippines, private schools, then the girl will have to ask a guy out
I mean,
effectively.
how many proms did you attend?
I don't think I want to share that on this particular podcast, but let's just say I cannot count. And
I mean-
I've gone by rounds of the different schools, and I have my own observations about these schools and the culture. It's very interesting. So, but back to this point.
But that was something really significant for young people, even
Yeah.
for you back in the day. And so
And you didn't you go? You had a ball of your own in your Christian international school, right?
yeah, but I think it wasn't. I didn't have as many proms as you did.
Sure, right. You
You were
lived in a
like-
smaller
No,
bubble.
you were like the date that everyone wanted for their daughter.
This is not
Yeah,
the
but
main
that's true.
conversation right now, but people are probably wanting to hear more about that. But so bringing it back on point, we're saying looking at the normal
Mm-hmm.
balls and the tradition that happens junior senior. What we found refreshing about this purity ball is please
Yes,
carry.
then we saw that, hey, this is something so much more intentional, where you actually go with your child to attend what's called a purity ball, and together you make a commitment to purity. And a lot of times when we think of staying pure, we're always sort of thinking that it's for the youth. They have to practice staying pure. They shouldn't have sex before marriage. They should not be looking at pornography and all this stuff. But purity is something that all of us have to pursue, young, old, whatever. And so when we saw this event in the US, we were like, we need to do something like this in the Philippines, but let's even take it another step further and have a purity symposium before the actual ball. Because if you're just going to go to the ball and make a commitment to purity, that's a great thing, but do the students fully understand and recognize the value of purity, why it's important, and do the parents also understand? And maybe a lot of us have come from sexual brokenness in our past experiences. So even as parents, how do we heal from that and together as a family move forward with a commitment to purity?
Right. And I think there's a lot of practical things that are also covered, right? And speaking as a dad, let me just share a little bit of the inspiration, the deep inspiration I had when I heard about it. I don't think we actually attended one, but we heard about it from friends that we had met in those different trips, learning from the U.S., especially the American pioneers, if you will. What really moved me was the idea, because we had such young kids back then. This is when Elijah was, before he even became 12, 13, way back, right? They said instead of the boy and the girl going to a event together, why not have the dad take out the daughter? That's what really resonated with my heart. Or the mom taking the son. That would have been the date, if you will. But they did it still with their classmates and their friends. So it's still boys and girls, but with moms and or dads, right? So what inspired me was the picture of when you take them out to have a good time that they can remember, just like you would in a prom or ball. The unique pivot or the unique difference is that it's celebrated together. So there is that joy of being able to have that milestone as a teenager finishing off their high school years, but it's with dad or mom. So that really inspired me. Now the practical things that it covers. Whereas in a junior or senior prom or ball, you basically learn, and I'm not sure that this is the origin story of it, but you will learn the proper way to deal with a lady. You're going out together, you're taking her, right? You put on the corset and you put on the boutonniere, you get dressed. So all of that is still carried over. So it's basic manners and interaction or culture, if you will. So that is still covered. That practical thing is still covered. But when we think about the purity ball in the homeschooling context, we do it much earlier, 12, 13, because on a practical note, there's no sex ed. In schools, there will be a little bit of the sex ed. They talk about this, right? Now, as good Christian parents, we know and we learn how to be able to talk about this. And we've had other podcast episodes or dialogues talking about this. But for the purity ball, this is intentionally done also. We talk about God's design for sex, and that is what happens in the symposium that you were talking about. This is a large part of the learning that happens between parent and child, so that they can have the right template of how to talk about it, and or B, which is if you've not talked about it and there's been learnings from, like me, I learned it from pornography. Then there's a way to undo it and see now what the Bible has to say.
Yeah.
So that then it becomes something literally pure.
Yeah, and you know, interestingly, from what we've observed from doing this for many, many years, is that most families actually don't sit down to have conversations about what is sex according to God's design. And it's true, most children pick it up by learning about it from friends or online. And so it's already a distorted view. And so what we encourage parents, even during the symposium, is you be the ones to sit down with your kids and really explain to them God's beautiful design for marriage. And
Say it again. God's
beautiful
design.
design for marriage, and not
for sex in the context of
yes,
marriage.
yes,
right?
thank
That is the emphasis. It's sex is a beautiful thing in the context of marriage. I think what can happen to Christian parents, and I just jumped in because this is such an important point, right? That we say even at the balls, many parents sincerely will want to protect their kids from immorality and all those things. I think any decent parent, whether they're spiritual or not, will instinctively want that, right? At least we like to think that way. But there are distortions. And so what can happen is parents will be like, kids, don't talk about that. That's bad. Sex,
where'd you hear about that?
where'd you hear about that?
Yeah.
We react, we get, or
Yeah.
they react and it gets big. So back to you, it's important to then talk about this because
Yeah, because who else is going to explain it in a way that is healthy and normal and also holy? It really should be us as parents. In fact, I remember when Elijah was really little and we were coming home from badminton and he just randomly asked, you know, how does the baby get into the mommy's tummy? And he was sincerely asking. He must have been about 5 years old at the time. And he really wanted to know all the details. And praise God, because Edric and I were both there. So we both contributed to the discussion and we named the parts what they should be named. And it was a very, how should I put it? It wasn't like a squeamish sort of situation or discussion.
it was
I think
for me a little bit.
a little bit nervous at first because I was like, oh, we're going to have this talk and he's 5 years old. But because he was really interested and wanted to know, and it was very scientific also the way we explained it, but we added the part about, you know, it's really beautiful in the context of marriage and that's how God designed it. And that's why you want to protect it. And that's why you want to look forward to it. And so after that, he sat back in the chair like he had some, you know, new revelation in his life as a 5-year-old. He was like, you know, thank you, mom and dad. And I think ever since then, and by God's grace alone, you know, he's really kept himself pure. Our other sons as well, because we've had this, and our daughters so far, they're younger, but we've had these conversations with our children multiple times. And I think the way to do it is anticipate that you should have it. So as they start to get older, you can add more and more details, but don't expect that they're going to learn it the right way from other sources.
Sure. And
Yeah.
so barring the purity ball experience, to parents that are listening to this already now, let's give them some quick tips on how to broach the conversation, how to be able to start that, because
He's an expert at this.
right,
Let's go.
because it is such an important conversation that it is a beautiful thing in the context of marriage. So as Joy was sharing, you need to have these bullet points already in your brain so that one of two things can happen, right? You initiate the conversation, which I would say is maybe 10-15% of the time, but most often it will be spontaneous when your child brings up something related to that. So be prepared with these practical tips. Number one, call it out as it is. Do not use special terms, metaphors, the birds and the bees. I mean, nothing morally wrong with that, but because it's such a beautiful thing in the context of God's design, then say it as God has designed it. Name the body parts, say what happens, the interaction there, and spell it out very plainly. I want to say it right now, but I'm not sure that this is appropriate. Hearing it over and over and over in a podcast or watching this on video. So you get what we're saying, right? Don't use any code words. Say it as it is. This is what happens when a wife and a husband in marriage have sex so that they can become a mom and dad, like dad and mom. So say it like it is.
And also, it's not just for procreation. I mean, we've explained it to our kids,
Yeah.
right? That it's also something that mom and dad enjoy together because we love one another. And so I think they've
Because
asked
it
questions
is
about
because
that.
it is a pleasurable thing.
Yes.
It's enjoyable. in the context of marriage. That's how God designed it, right?
And I think that, when we explain sex in a healthy way, in a holy way, then it points to the goodness of God, right? Because an amazingly good God would create something like this that is so pleasurable, but it's for a certain context. And that's why it also points to how God wants us to have pleasure, but in the right context.
Yeah, now honestly, most of our kids will get squeamish when it comes to the pleasure part because they have no construct of that.
Hey,
But so you give them the fact, what is sex? So it is what happens between husband and wife in the context of marriage, using those body parts, right? The second is it's a beautiful thing, it's pleasurable. And then the third, and I think the most important point that you will use that I've already said in those two is that it is a beautiful thing in the right context. So those are a couple of pointers.
And-
If you're able to rehearse that in your mind, right, even before the conversation, it becomes easier because at the start, I'll be honest, it feels a little squeamish because let's be honest, and if we're very honest with ourselves, this is not something that our parents had as a conversation with us. So there's no template for us, right? But it is a beautiful thing.
Well, can I
the right
say
context.
something?
Yes, go.
Do you remember when we were about to get married and Dad actually pulled you aside and talked to you about sex? I mean, I know it might be hard for the people listening here to believe, but we're about to get married and he pulled you aside and he wanted to make sure that you understood sex from a godly perspective. Wasn't it one of the most awkward conversations you've ever had?
One of, yes. I was 25 years old, so of course I knew what it was like. But I think the point of that,
You didn't know what
and
it was like
since
yet.
and since
Still a
you
virgin.
brought this up, right, is the added tip that I got that nobody will maybe bring up with you is as a husband, ensure that you give your wife pleasure as well, so she enjoys it. Because most often in the context of sex, it's the man looking for, and then once he's, you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
we're not gonna go there, but since you brought that up, that's I remembered, and I want to give us a free tip also to emphasize that for couples who are listening already here. But going back, let's bring it back to the purity ball itself, right? So we've talked about the importance to have the conversation. So that's the symposium part. And then the ball itself, we talked about how in its original design, which we've adopted, it is the parent with the child or the teenager, in this case, 12, 13 years old. Now, let's talk about
May I
the
say something?
actual moments that makes it memorable.
Yeah.
And the reason why it is so special, and it has been special for all of our 1, 2, 3, 4 kids so far. But you had something to say, then
just
we'll
really
land.
quickly, and this
land
is
on.
why we also segue in those discussions to God's design for gender and how everything beautifully fits together, right? So we reinforce God's design for gender as well in those conversations. So moving to the purity ball, the reason why it's so precious, and we've now been part of 3 so far this year. Am I correct?
2.
Or 2,
this
sorry,
year.
2.
Yeah, there's 4 that's been run, but we've been part of the 2.
We've been part of 2, part of the symposium and part of the ball itself. And when you see the parents and the kids interacting with each other at these events where they write personal letters just to tell their parents how much they've appreciated their intentionality and how much they've appreciated their parents, just teaching them about sex and marriage, and then the parents also writing to their kids and telling them how much they love them and appreciate them. And it's just such a precious exchange, and everyone's crying.
Yeah.
And you see really manly guys crying, whether they're dads or sons, and just kind of breaking down because it's a moment that's so uncommon, I think, in today's day and age,
Yeah.
where you can have parents and children just being so open with each other and talking about these topics and really being committed to one another's purity and holding each other accountable. And then there's an exchange of,
Yeah.
you're going to say,
Yeah,
purity
no,
ring.
I was gonna say, it is surprising that when we hear it now, maybe some of you are like, that sounds so cheesy, right? Like teenage kid writing a love letter to their parent and the parent writing a love letter to their child. Then the love letter contains even apologies, maybe about offenses that they've had in the area of purity, because the whole purpose of that love letter and this ring ceremony that I'm about to talk about is the whole ball centers around the commitment that the parent and child make to each other. So it's almost like a marriage in a way, right? So picture a dad with his daughter, or a mom with her son, or both parents with the child, which is most
It's
often
not a
the case.
marriage, because that's
Right?
weird.
Yeah. Obviously, but I'm saying this, the celebration is so special in that way, right? So you have them in front of each other, and they write that love letter, and then they make this commitment. They make the commitment, and they exchange rings to effectively saying, I will, as a parent, commit to be a good model to you and to also protect your purity to the best of my ability. And then they will make a commitment to their parents to also say, I will commit to be pure before God until the day that, Lord willing, I will get married, and I'll exchange my purity ring for a
Yes.
wedding ring.
Yeah.
So special. And as a dad, with the three boys, it was good, and it was nice, especially with my daughter, with Tiana. Oh, I was in tears just because it's so precious, right? Being able to have that moment, to say that, and follow through with it now, even up to this recording. So that's why I've loved this period, and that's why I think it's so important that parents have an opportunity to do this with the children, to mark that as a moment in their lives as a family where they choose, despite what may have already happened in their respective individual lives, to saying, I can get it right starting now. I will follow God's design for not just purity. And when I spoke about this, right, I used the verse in Thessalonians that where God says through Paul's letter, he says, be holy. It's his instruction. And God says this even in the Old Testament, behold as I'm holy. So the whole battle cry, if you will, of the purity ball is not just to focus on the sexual purity side of things, but really to live a holy life, to say that all of my life, I will commit to obey all of God's words to the best of my ability.
To
Because
live
that's
set
what
apart,
it means to be holy, to live set apart for his purposes.
Yeah, and at first, because we don't know all of these families, right? And we encountered them, a lot of them, just at the purity ball. But it was amazing to me to hear some of the testimonials, even after, where parents would approach us and say, you know what, thank you so much. I wish we had known about this much sooner, much earlier. But that's when we told them, it's not too late. And this particular family that I'm even thinking of, who came up to us, I saw them during the ceremony, and it was a very touching moment, seeing them with their more grown-up children. And they were really enjoying the ball and really crying together and making this commitment together. Because there's also a form that you sign together. And it's really,
Commitment form,
it's
yeah.
a commitment form. And basically you're saying it, as a parent, it's not just me who's gonna be protecting you and helping you stay pure as my child, but it's also you, my child, hold us accountable, right? We'll hold one, there's that mutual accountability. And so that extends even past the ball into daily life, where, for example, you with our sons on a regular basis,
Yeah.
you will ask them about, how are you boys in the area of purity? And they ask you, and you confess to each other if there have been any struggles, and you process these things.
Super.
And
We've talked about that in the other dialogues
yeah.
also, yeah. So maybe we can close this whole conversation about purity and these balls that have been happening with one of the highlights, as we've observed also, is that families do not journey alone. If you're going to follow through with these commitments, although you've made it you as a parent with your child to you, you cannot journey alone. So what's been beautiful in many of these gatherings is the community around them when they're able to celebrate this together, so that even after that date, because it's just a date, you're then able to journey with each other and say, hey, let's make sure that dad and mom are staying holy or being as the best of their ability, and their children are doing that as well. So if you have not yet been part of a purity ball, this is obviously our way of saying, hey, find one, and it's amazing. If not, then take these practical tips and the conversations already with your children. So,
and join the homeschool community,
of course,
Homeschool Global,
That's right.
because this is where we have the purity balls.
it's a privilege to see that it is, because the community is quite robust already. There's so many opportunities to do this. So thanks again, guys. I hope this is able to add value. That is our desire. And remember, even if you did not get it right from the start, you can get it right starting now. I'm Edric.
I'm Joy.
Thanks for joining us.